In an age when there are untruths all around us, one of the biggest lies is that there is such a thing as self-made men and women. We look at, okay, now I'm getting an echo. We look at rich people or very talented rich people and think, wow, that person has done great things. But no, those wealthy people who start corporations, win music awards, win acting awards, win sports championships, all of those folks have two things going for them. First, they started out with great natural ability. And second, they had somebody holding the door open for them. So, did you ever hear of a man named James T. Bell? I'm not talking about James T. Kirk. I mean a real human being who lived in the previous century named James T. Bell, who was probably the greatest baseball center fielder of all time. Still don't know the name? Maybe you would know him by his nickname, Cool Papa Bell. And the reason, most likely, that you've never heard of Cool Papa Bell was because he played in the African American leagues in the days before Jackie Robinson. Faster than Willie Mays, and as good a career batting average as Stan Musial. But the door to the baseball major leagues was slammed shut to him because he was African American. And there it is. Success and material blessings in this life are mostly the result of two circumstances. One, that you have natural ability to begin with, and two, that you have folks who hold the door open for you. As I mentioned a moment ago, the book of Deuteronomy is framed primarily as one long sermon that Moses is giving to the people as they have gotten through the wilderness and have come to the edge of the promised land. And Moses sits them down for a major address. And in it, he mostly repeats the laws and the teachings that appear in the earlier books of the law. But here in this one passage, he also addresses what he sees as a very serious temptation that will befall the people. Let me back up and say the problem in kind of our human nature is that we want to believe that we have earned all these things that we have. And what we have is directly and solely because of our hard work and ingenuity. We say to ourselves, I made all that money by myself. Why should I have to share any of it? All of my accomplishments and all this money prove how great I am. To which Moses says, stop it. Stop it. That is delusional thinking. Stop thinking that way right now. And Moses explains why it is wrong that any of God's people should think that way. He says, first, remember, you started out as slaves. If God had not set in motion the opportunities to gain your freedom, then you would still be slaves with nothing in Egypt. Then Moses says that God was with you all the way through the wilderness, providing food and water. God protected them from the snakes and the scorpions. Otherwise, they would have died on their way to the promised land. Moses is saying to the people, don't forget, it is God who held the door open for you that you should get this far. We like to think well of ourselves. We like to think that we are the architects of our own success in the world. But thinking that way can lead to some serious spiritual problems, pride, and forgetting God. The right way to think is to live every day in gratitude to God. The right way to live is to understand that all the things that we possess are gifts from God, and we hold them in stewardship for God. Jesus tells us a story that is instructive to us about how we should regard the material blessings of this life. It happened in the Gospel of Luke that Jesus was teaching a crowd, and two brothers came to him, and they were arguing. They were arguing over their inheritance and wanted Jesus to help them decide the matter. And Jesus answered and said, "Who made me arbiter over your dispute? But beware of all manner of greed, because a person's life does not consist in the abundance of their possessions." He said, "There once was a farmer, a very wealthy and successful farmer, and in a particular year, his crop was bigger than it had ever been before, and he did not know what to do because he didn't have room to store all the grain that he had grown. So he said to himself, 'I know, I will build bigger barns and put it all in there, and it will all be for me, and for the rest of my life I will do nothing but eat, drink, and be merry.' But God came to that man after that and said, 'Fool, this very night your soul is being required of you, and whose will those things be then?' In other words, you cannot take it with you when you leave this life. So it is foolish to always be in pursuit of more, with no regard for others." So Moses gives this sermon. The people do enter the land. Then what happened? Well, that's the rest of the Old Testament that tells the then what happened. But here's the short version. The people did enter the land. They conquered the land and settled successfully. They grew wonderful grapes. Their herds multiplied. And of course, exactly as Moses predicted, the people forgot about God and chose to believe that they alone were responsible for all their great success and prosperity. The more money the rich made, the less they cared about the poor, and the less they cared about God's law. And it wasn't too many generations after the great kings David and Solomon that first the Assyrians and then the Babylonians swept through Israel and took the people away from the land, back into captivity. So if Moses' command to the Hebrews was that they should not forget God, and that God was the one who gave them the power to succeed in the first place, then the question for us today is, what does not forgetting look like? What does it mean to actively remember God in your daily living? I'd like to suggest three things that it means to me. And the first of those is to practice gratitude, to actually take time to remember that God has given you these abilities, that God has given you these people in your life who held the door open for you to make it possible for you to succeed. I had a mentor growing up in high school named Bob Jones who took a special interest in me as someone who might someday go into ministry, who took extra time for me to encourage me, to give me extra training. Gratitude for those things. Gratitude can be an incredibly powerful and invigorating experience, says researcher Jeff Huffman. There's growing evidence that being grateful may not only bring good feelings, but also leads to better health. Gratitude keeps you connected with God and keeps you in a better place spiritually. The second thing is to show that you remember, in turn, to hold the door open for other people who come after you. Look around you. Who is it that needs help? Who is it that needs support? What young person needs encouragement? Who needs extra coaching and support? As you have received, now you are called to so share. It is like the line from the musical Hello, Dolly. Dolly is talking about money and resources, and she says, "Money, pardon the expression, is like manure. It is not worth a thing unless it's spread around, encouraging young things to grow." Spread around those opportunities. It is our job to be someone, each of us, who encourages others around us, particularly the young. The third thing I would say is that we need to remember to regard what we have gained as something that is given to us by God in stewardship, that we may use it to bless others, to do good with it, to give to charities, to do the work of love, to give to the church so that we can spread the gospel, to invest in young people. I was very inspired by this story a year ago at the Morehouse College class of 2019 commencement. Investor Robert F. Smith gave the address, and towards the end of the address, he said to the gathered group of 400 graduates that my family, he said, is going to create a grant that will eliminate all of your student loans. You great Morehouse students are bound only by the limits of your own conviction and creativity. His gift to the 400 graduating seniors was worth about $40 million, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Elijah Dormius, a business administration major, went to the reporter and said, if I could do a backflip, I would. I am ecstatic, because he himself had $90,000 in student debt. Smith is founder of the private equity and venture capital firm Vista Equity Partners, is worth $5 billion, according to Forbes magazine. And he's the only African American to sign Bill and Melinda Gates' Giving Pledge, the initiative created to help address society's most pressing problems. Smith has pledged to give away half his net worth to causes that support equality for African Americans and to protect our environment. He was quoted after this gathering saying, "I will never forget that my path was paved by my parents, grandparents, and generations of African Americans whose names I will never know. Their struggles, their courage, and their progress allowed me to strive and achieve." Smith recognized that it wasn't all him, that there were indeed others who held the door open for him. Those agents, those loving agents of God that enabled him to become who he is. God granted him material wealth, and he is giving back. He is now holding the door open for a new generation. I encourage each one of you who's listening today to remember, as Moses said, to remember the Lord your God with gratitude and with giving. Amen.